This is the Bible in 1 year, day 13. Divine acceleration. A few years ago, Pippa and I were asked to speak at a conference in Somerset, southwest England. The journey from London should have taken about 3 hours. However, it was a really hot day, and ahead of us a hay wagon had caught fire and spilled its load across the motorway, which had melted as a result. We were stuck almost stationary for 5 hours. It was such a relief when finally it was time to accelerate. There are times in our own personal lives, church life and ministry when it feels like we're stuck and unable to move at any pace. At other times, openings begin to appear and it's time to accelerate. God is the God of acceleration. He is able to speed things up at a much faster rate than is humanly possible. From Psalm 9 and Matthew 10. Expect opposition. Acceleration may lead to increased opposition. The higher the profile you have, the more criticism you can expect. God's people have always faced opposition. David faced many enemies. Opposition and enmity is extremely painful and difficult. However, in Christ, you are promised that ultimately you will overcome. We see a foretaste of this in the psalm for today. David praises God for the victory. I will praise you, O Lord, with all my heart. I will tell of all your wonders. I will be glad and rejoice in you. I will sing the praises of your name, O Most High. My enemies turn back. We live in a hostile world. Jesus warns, don't think I've come to make life cozy. Jesus is saying, don't be surprised by opposition. Be peacemakers. You're called to break the cycle of retaliation. Nevertheless, opposition may come, even from those who are very close to you. Millions of followers of Jesus around the world are facing physical persecution today simply because of what they believe. Some face opposition, repression, and discrimination from governments at a local or national level. You may not face opposition like this in your life, but you should expect some opposition, whether from the media, friends, and family who do not understand your faith, or work colleagues who disagree with what you stand for. Lord, in the face of opposition, I will praise you with all my heart. I will tell of all your wonders. I will be glad and rejoice in you. New Testament from Matthew 10 and 11. Embrace sacrifice. Jesus calls on his disciples to be willing to sacrifice everything for his sake. Anyone who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Your love for Jesus should exceed even the greatest love you have for those closest to you. Jesus continues, whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Perhaps this is what the Apostle Paul meant when he urges us to offer our bodies as a living sacrifice. This is the way in which you discover God's will for your life, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. If you want God to use you more, if you want to accelerate, you must be willing to embrace this kind of sacrifice. Nothing you do in the service of Jesus is wasted. Jesus says, give a cool cup of water to someone who's thirsty, for instance. The smallest act of giving or receiving makes you a true apprentice. You won't lose out on a thing. Martin of Tours was Bishop of Tours, France from AD 371. One very cold night, riding on horseback, he passed a beggar. Martin got off his horse, tore his robe in two, and gave half of it to the beggar. That night, Martin had a dream in which he saw Jesus wearing the robe that had been torn in two on his shoulders. When asked where it came from, Jesus replied, my servant Martin gave it to me. In the immediate context in Matthew, the sacrifice Jesus is referring to may be simply being identified with him in a hostile world. He says, whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will also disown before my Father in heaven. Acknowledging Jesus can lead to opposition and difficulties. For many of the first disciples, it literally meant taking up their cross and following him even to death. For us, the cost may be different. but we are called to the same radical commitment to Jesus. Lord, help me to be willing to take up my cross and follow you. Today I offer you my body as a living sacrifice. Old Testament from Genesis 27 and 28. Enjoy the challenge. Apparently, Formula One racing drivers have to be exceptionally fit and physically strong because of the forces exerted on their bodies during the race. If we want to see acceleration in the advancement of the kingdom of God, Jesus says it will need forceful people. Most translations use the word violent instead of forceful. However, most commentators prefer this translation and positive interpretation. These are people who are not put off by opposition or the need for sacrifice. In fact, they enjoy the challenge. As we look back in church history, there are many examples of men and women who inspire us by their passionate, dynamic and proactive lives. They've been used to change the world. Throughout history, the kingdom of heaven has been advancing as forceful, spirit-filled people lay hold of it. Jesus says, from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has been forcefully advancing and forceful people lay hold of it. The context of these words is that John the Baptist in prison is asking if Jesus is the one prophesied about. In effect, Jesus replies by saying, look at the evidence. Jesus goes on to say that John the Baptist was the greatest person who ever lived before Jesus and his church. John the Baptist was the last of the Old Covenant prophets. We see many examples in the Old Testament of these forceful men and women. Jacob was a forceful man. Later we'll read of how he was forceful in a good way, determined to know God's blessing. However, in today's passage, we see how his forceful nature led him into wrongdoing. He was absolutely determined to get his father's blessing. He knew how important it was, but he ended up using deception in order to get it. Jacob's mother, Rebekah, was also a forceful woman. Not only did she show favoritism to Jacob, but she was also involved in the conspiracy to deceive Isaac. The end result is a spectacular family feud, consequences of which lasted for centuries. It is a fairly unedifying tale, and we can be left wondering what to make of it. It certainly does not present itself as a good example to follow. Despite everything, God's plans and purposes continue to be worked out. His promises to Abraham and his descendants continue. They are passed on to Jacob, exactly as God had promised before the brothers were born. If everyone had acted openly and honorably, a lot of grief and heartache might have been avoided. Almost everything about these stories and these people is flawed, and yet God still manages to work through them. I find it such a relief to know that a perfect God can use imperfect people. God blessed Jacob. His father Isaac gave him his blessing. Later on, God spoke to Jacob in a dream. He sees a ladder that reaches from earth to heaven, and the angels of God ascending and descending it. There is an open way between heaven and earth for all of us. God tells him, all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I will be with you and will watch over you wherever you go. God used these forceful men and women, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Rachel. But Jesus says none of them were as great as John the Baptist, and John the Baptist is not as great as the least of the followers of Jesus in the days of the kingdom of heaven, and that includes you. Lord, thank you that you are with me and watch over me wherever I go. Help me to be counted amongst those forceful people enjoying the exhilaration, excitement and challenge of a life spent following Jesus.
Pippa adds, I've just finished reading Genesis 27. Deceit and lies do not do much for family unity.
I will praise you, Lord, with all my heart. I will tell of all the marvelous things you have done. I will be filled with joy because of you. I will sing praises to your name, O Most High. My enemies retreated. They staggered and died when you appeared. for you have judged in my favor. From your throne you have judged with fairness. You have rebuked the nations and destroyed the wicked. You have erased their names forever. The enemy is finished in endless ruins. The cities you uprooted are now forgotten.
Everyone who acknowledges me publicly here on earth, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But everyone who denies me here on earth, I will also deny before my Father in heaven. Don't imagine that I came to bring peace to the earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword. I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Your enemies will be right in your own household. If you love your father or mother more than you love me, you are not worthy of being mine. Or if you love your son or daughter more than me, you are not worthy of being mine. If you refuse to take up your cross and follow me, you are not worthy of being mine. If you cling to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for me, you will find it. Anyone who receives you receives me, and anyone who receives me receives the Father who sent me. If you receive a prophet as one who speaks for God, you will be given the same reward as a prophet. And if you receive righteous people because of their righteousness, you will be given a reward like theirs. And if you give even a cup of cold water to one of the least of my followers, you will surely be rewarded. When Jesus had finished giving these instructions to his 12 disciples, he went out to teach and preach in towns throughout the region. John the Baptist, who was in prison, heard about all the things the Messiah was doing. So he sent his disciples to ask Jesus, "Are you the Messiah we've been expecting, or should we keep looking for someone else?" Jesus told them, "Go back to John and tell him what you have heard and seen. The blind see, the lame walk, those with leprosy are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised to life, and the good news is being preached to the poor." And he added, "God blesses those who do not fall away because of me." As John's disciples were leaving, Jesus began talking about him to the crowds. "What kind of man did you go into the wilderness to see? Was he a weak reed swayed by every breath of wind? Or were you expecting to see a man dressed in expensive clothes? No, people with expensive clothes live in palaces. Were you looking for a prophet? Yes, and he is more than a prophet. John is the man to whom the scriptures refer when they say, 'Look, I am sending my messenger ahead of you, and he will prepare your way before you.' I tell you the truth, of all who have ever lived, none is greater than John the Baptist. Yet, even the least person in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he is. And from the time John the Baptist began preaching until now, the kingdom of heaven has been forcefully advancing, and violent people are attacking it. For before John came, all the prophets and the law of Moses looked forward to this present time. And if you are willing to accept what I say, he is Elijah, the one the prophets said would come. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand."
Chapter 27. One day, when Isaac was old and turning blind, he called for Esau, his older son, and said, "My son?" "Yes, father," Esau replied. "I am an old man now," Isaac said, "and I don't know when I may die. Take your bow and a quiver full of arrows, and go out into the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare my favorite dish, and bring it here for me to eat. Then I will pronounce the blessing that belongs to you, my firstborn son, before I die." But Rebekah overheard what Isaac had said to his son Esau. So when Esau left to hunt for the wild game, she said to her son Jacob, "Listen, I overheard your father say to Esau, 'Bring me some wild game and prepare me a delicious meal. Then I will bless you in the Lord's presence before I die. Now, my son, listen to me. Do exactly as I tell you. Go out to the flocks and bring me 2 fine young goats. I'll use them to prepare your father's favorite dish. Then take the food to your father so he can eat it and bless you before he dies." "But look," Jacob replied to Rebekah, "my brother Esau is a hairy man, and my skin is smooth. What if my father touches me? He'll see that I'm trying to trick him, and then he'll curse me instead of blessing me." But his mother replied, "Then let the curse fall on me, my son. Just do what I tell you. Go out and get the goats for me." So Jacob went out and got the young goats for his mother. Rebekah took them and prepared a delicious meal just the way Isaac liked it. Then she took Esau's favorite clothes, which were there in the house, and gave them to her younger son Jacob. She covered his arms and the smooth part of his neck with the skin of the young goats. Then she gave Jacob the delicious meal, including freshly baked bread. So Jacob took the food to his father. "My father," he said. "Yes, my son," Isaac answered. "Who are you, Esau or Jacob?" Jacob replied, "It's Esau, your firstborn son. I've done as you've told me. Here is the wild game. Now sit up and eat it so you can give me your blessing." Isaac asked, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God put it in my path," Jacob replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come closer so I can touch you and make sure that you really are Esau." So Jacob went closer to his father, and Isaac touched him. "The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's," Isaac said. But he did not recognize Jacob, because Jacob's hands felt hairy just like Esau's. So Isaac prepared to bless Jacob. "But are you really my son Esau?" he asked. "Yes, I am," Jacob replied. Then Isaac said, "Now, my son, bring me the wild game. Let me eat it, and then I will give you my blessing." So Jacob took the food to his father, and Isaac ate it. He also drank the wine that Jacob served him. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come a little closer and kiss me, my son." So Jacob went over and kissed him. And when Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he was finally convinced, and he blessed his son. He said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of the outdoors, which the Lord has blessed. From the dew of heaven and the richness of the earth, may God always give you abundant harvests of grain and bountiful new wine. May many nations become your servants, and may they bow down to you. May you be the master over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. All who curse you will be cursed, and all who bless you will be blessed." As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and almost before Jacob had left his father, Esau returned from his hunt. Esau prepared a delicious meal and brought it to his father. Then he said, "Sit up, my father, and eat my wild game so you can give me your blessing." But Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" Esau replied, "It's your son, your firstborn son Esau." Isaac began to tremble uncontrollably and said, "Then who just served me wild game? I have already eaten it, and I blessed him just before you came, and yes, that blessing must stand." When Esau heard his father's words, he let out a loud and bitter cry. "Oh, my father, what about me? Bless me too," he begged. But Isaac said, "Your brother was here, and he tricked me. He has taken away your blessing." Esau exclaimed, "No wonder his name is Jacob, for now he has cheated me twice. First, he took my rights as the firstborn, and now he has stolen my blessing. Oh, haven't you saved even one blessing for me?" Isaac said to Esau, "I have made Jacob your master, and have declared that all his brothers will be his servants. I have guaranteed him an abundance of grain and wine. What is left for me to give you, my son?" Esau pleaded, "But do you have only one blessing? Oh, my father, bless me too." Then Esau broke down and wept. Finally, his father Isaac said to him, "You will live away from the richness of the earth, and away from the dew of the heaven above. You will live by your sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you decide to break free, you will shake his yoke from your neck." From that time on, Esau hated Jacob because their father had given Jacob the blessing. And Esau began to scheme, "I will soon be mourning my father's death. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. But Rebekah heard about Esau's plans. So she sent for Jacob and told him, "Listen, Esau is consoling himself by plotting to kill you. So listen carefully, my son. Get ready and flee to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay there with him until your brother cools off. When he calms down and forgets what you have done to him, I will send for you to come back. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Then Rebekah said to Isaac, "I'm sick and tired of these local Hittite women. I would rather die than see Jacob marry one of them." Chapter 28. So Isaac called for Jacob, blessed him, and said, "You must not marry any of these Canaanite women. Instead, go at once to Padan Aram, to the house of your grandfather Bethuel, and marry one of your uncle Laban's daughters. May God Almighty bless you and give you many children, and may your descendants multiply and become many nations. May God pass on to you and your descendants the blessings he promised to Abraham. May you own this land where you are now living as a foreigner, for God gave this land to Abraham." So Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padan Aram to stay with his uncle Laban, his mother's brother, the son of Bethuel, the Aramean. Esau knew that his father Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him to Padan Aram to find a wife, and that he had warned Jacob, "You must not marry a Canaanite woman." He also knew that Jacob had obeyed his parents and gone to Padan Aram. It was now very clear to Esau that his father did not like the local Canaanite women. So Esau visited his uncle Ishmael's family and married one of Ishmael's daughters in addition to the wives he already had. His new wife's name was Mahalath. She was the sister of Nebaioth and the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son. Meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba and traveled toward Haran. At sundown, he arrived at a good place to set up camp and stop there for the night. Jacob found a stone to rest his head against and lay down to sleep. As he slept, he dreamed of a stairway that reached from the earth up to heaven. And he saw the angels of God going up and down the stairway. At the top of the stairway stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham, and the God of your father Isaac. The ground you are lying on belongs to you. I am giving it to you and your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. They will spread out in all directions, to the west and the east, to the north and the south. And all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. What's more, I am with you, and I will protect you wherever you go. One day I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have finished giving you everything I have promised you." Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it." But he was also afraid and said, "What an awesome place this is! It is none other than the house of God, the very gateway to heaven." The next morning, Jacob got up very early. He took the stone he had rested his head against, and he set it upright as a memorial pillar. Then he poured olive oil over it. He named that place Bethel, which means house of God, although it was previously called Luz. Then Jacob made this vow: "If God will indeed be with me and protect me on this journey, and if he will provide me with food and clothing, and if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will certainly be my God. And this memorial pillar I have set up will become a place for worshiping God, and I will present to God a tenth of everything he gives me."